On this, the 77th anniversary of D-Day, with its generation nearly now past, we are reminded that death is an unending presence in our lives, like a shadow in the early evening. And so we pause to remember those with ties to our beloved church who have left us this year, knowing they can live on in our memories. And so we remember them. Come, let us worship together.
So good morning. Bet you wondered what was going on. Our main computer here in the chapel decided to take a break from life. And so we hustled around. I ran home and got my laptop. Not only that, we forgot to tell Dustin that the service started at 9 o'clock. So we texted Ted, who came in here without shoes, but Ted is such a good doobie. That was fine. And poor Dustin had to run out of the house, and Dustin is finally here. Trying to think if there's anything else that went wrong already this morning, and it's only 9:30. So we are compressing the worship part of the service. But every year at the program meeting, I remember, I say the names, I ring a bell between each name, and I say the names of those whose deaths are recorded in our book. And our book goes back to, probably, 1632. So as Michael said, these are folks who have relationship to our community and whose services were held or who passed away this year. So we're still going to take a few minutes to do that, and then we're going to hop into our annual meeting. So those of you who thought you got to skip the worship, didn't happen. So, but this part won't be long. And again, it's really an elaboration of what we do every annual meeting when we remember those as we gather together to remember all the wonderful things that happened over the end of over this church year. We remember those who are no longer with us. So Michael will begin, and there you go.
Thank you, Catherine. Just to call attention to the flowers, which are from the Flower Committee with special help from Regina Mortland this morning. And I don't like to contradict Catherine, but I think it's important that the record be clear. Ted showed in flip-flops. So he had shoes, just no socks. David Shea. One of David's friends told me he first met David in 7th grade in the PIAT group, the RE class for middle schoolers, where they try to put it all together, or PIAT. David was active there and in HIP, and also very involved with the FPC affiliated Boy Scout troop, where his dad, Joe Shea, was a leader. But one of the things David liked to do at church was play Dungeons and Dragons with friends in the parlor at the big round table on Sunday afternoons, while his dad was still busy somewhere in the church doing all the things his dad did for and with our church. David was known for his big smile and even bigger laugh. Though David was not particularly active in First Parish in his adult years, the church remained important to him, never so apparent as when he and his siblings, Susan and Andy, wholeheartedly embraced the congregation to help with the grieving, honoring, and memorializing of their parents, who died but a few months apart. And his connection showed in less momentous ways as well. David almost always came to the summer fair, and when he was here, he always made a point of looking up some of his old friends from Piat. On the day David died suddenly this past March, I had just mailed him a note and a welcome spring from FPC card, a card specially commissioned as part of our efforts to stay in touch with our broader church family. When he died, his wife asked Catherine to co-officiate at his interment along with her local priest. Our church has had a very strong tie with the Shea family, and the Shea family, including David, have had very strong ties with us. David Shea. George Baird. George loved to sing and was good at it too. His voice graced our choir from the time he and Ann joined the church in 2007, after moving here to be closer to their daughter Julie and family. George died of COVID, joining millions of others worldwide whose lives were cut short by this scourge. While he was in hospital, he kept a joke book that he would read to the healthcare workers and did other things to try to cheer them up, understanding how wearying and dispiriting that work could be. The first word that comes to my mind in thinking of George is gentleman. When Catherine was on sabbatical and George was chair of membership, he and I worked closely together to plan and conduct a service which recognized new members. That was a pleasure for me. What a gentle way he had about him. I enjoyed every conversation I ever had. His presence was calming and full of grace. As a youth, George was a natural entrepreneur. He decided to make money cutting lawns, but instead of cutting the grass himself, he hired other kids to do that while he managed the business, coordinating bookings and sales. Not surprisingly, he later had a successful career as a management consultant. No wonder he was such a great membership chair. He was a Korean War vet who saw lots of frontline action, but like many, he did not like to talk about it much. As Julie has said, his 65-plus-year marriage to Anne was filled with love and mutual respect every day. They were blessed to have each other. We were blessed to have them. George Baird. Sharon Kent. Sharon loved music, and she loved singing too. She had a beautiful voice and sang in many choirs over her lifetime. One of her closest friends in the church, Elaine Stepansky, told me how much the two of them enjoyed singing in Persephone's Daughters together. When the group would go on out-of-town engagements, Sharon and Elaine roomed together, having great fun. Elaine said they joined Weight Watchers together, but said the best part was after the meeting when they could stop at a restaurant for a good meal. Sharon had a great sense of humor, and Elaine loved laughing with her. Country music was another passion of Sharon's. She and her late husband were avid RV campers, living the life, enjoying the sounds of being on the road again, and making new friendships with strangers in the RV world These were folks who shared their interests and love of nature and the open road. Given her close relationship and friendship with Elaine, it is somehow fitting that probably the most time I personally ever spent with Sharon was waiting in line with her at the wake for Elaine's husband, Dave. It was a long, slow-moving line, and that was fine. Sharon and I pleasantly passed the time, speaking fondly of Elaine and David, and Sharon's pleasure in the music she enjoyed and helped make here at First Parish. Sharon Kent. Jim Savicki. As his wife Donna said, Jim was the best and most beautiful man inside and out that she had ever known. He was all of that, tall, handsome, and imposing, but with a gentle way and spirit that made him easy to be around, and with a subtle sense of humor, to me symbolized by the large and beautiful statue of a cow his son Charles had somehow wrangled, and he and Donna allowed to graze in their backyard for years. It's still there. He told me once he had taught and coached football at Middleborough High School. With all those qualities, he must have been a fine coach and teacher. He was also a man of fierce passions. He cared deeply about the environment, about racial justice and social equity. And he put his values into action, working hard, committing long hours and other support, turning deeply held beliefs into concrete results. Witness his work with Sustainable Duxbury, the Mass Bail Fund, his work as chair of our own Buildings and Grounds Committee, and as a vital and sustaining force in the church's Racial Justice Task Force, whose work resulted in our 2018 resolution on racial justice and equity, and the installation last year of our Black Lives Matter banner. It was a blessing that Jim was well enough to attend the dedication last summer of the sign he worked so hard and untiringly to help make possible. He was there to witness something he had helped create. His presence was an inspiration to all of us and a reminder of the value of commitment and perseverance. I think of Jim every time I see that sign. Jim Savicki. Dorothy Pusick. If you are going to speak about Dorothy, who died last summer at 98, the main task is editing. Her life was so full, so colorful, so engaging. You have to leave so much out, or we'd never get to annual meeting, and Dorothy would not have wanted that. For behind the shimmering vision, the images of her flowing white hair, her colorful dresses with matching glasses, earrings, and jewelry, all of which seemed so captivatingly of a piece, so Dorothy, so right for her. Behind all that glamour was a woman of steely convictions, of liberal, progressive values, who believed in freedom, fairness, justice, and democracy. I had the privilege of driving her to and from fishermen's services and regular church occasionally for several years, and I always marveled at the breadth of her interests, her understanding of complex issues, her commitment to doing the right thing to make the world and its peoples better off, especially those less fortunate than she. She was generous to a fault. Few charities or progressive action groups that asked or ever refused a commitment or contribution from Dorothy. And plenty asked. She was always getting requests. She was a fighter who believed in what she supported. So time won't allow us to speak of her never-ending search for knowledge and self-improvement, by seemingly taking every class the Marshfield Senior Center had to offer, or her 60-plus year marriage to the love of her life, Bon, or her engaging way of making friends everywhere, including on the months-long sabbaticals she took to Europe and Africa by herself, or her teaching or work in the Peace Corps, or her love of Turner Classic movies, including horror films, or her determination to keep her driver's license despite insurmountable odds, or her thirst for mental engagement by having Jean Baker read aloud to her at the nursing home as her eyesight worsened and she became nearly bedridden. No, we don't have time to talk of these things or the 1,000 others, because Dorothy believed in democracy and would not want to be the cause of any delay in doing the people's business, our business, here at our annual spring meeting. Dorothy Busick.
Thank you, Michael. Of course, part of the computer glitch this morning was that my text about the folks I'm going to speak on never made it to the computer somehow. So I'm just going to speak from the heart about the folks that I'm going to remember. And the first person I'm remembering today is Ann Baird. Michael used the word gentleman for George, and if there's one word that I think sums up Ann Baird, it's lady. I remember every time that I saw George, Ann was always there. So I'm not surprised that they would have celebrated 66 years of marriage this summer. They were absolutely inseparable. And from what I could see, always in love over that, in all those decades. When I heard that George had passed away, I was concerned for how Ann would go on. And if memory serves, I think only a few days after he died, she was hospitalized. And within 5 weeks, she passed away herself. And I remember Julie saying that Ann died of a broken heart. She had lost her beloved, George. When the obituary was published for Ann and George, it was a joint obituary, which you don't see very often. And I took note of all George's accomplishments, but I was also quite interested in all the wonderful things Ann had done as a younger woman. I remember at one point the obituary mentioned that she made her own clothes when she went off to college, which I thought was extraordinary. She was trained as a teacher, and an English teacher, I believe. And she got her master's at one point when she had 2 kids. She got her master's at Jackson College, which was the women's part of Tufts University back then. So I was quite impressed by that. She obviously had a very academic side. And I believe she taught in schools in Cohasset and New York. So made such a contribution to education. She was active in things like the Women's League of Voters. She loved crafts. Here at First Parish, I think she was into the hook rugging group and that sort of thing, and book groups and all that. But from the time that the Bairds came here, it was always George and Ann and George. So as painful as it must be for the Lillis family to have lost both of them, I'm not surprised that somehow they needed to be together. If there are 3 words to sum up Ann, I would say grace, elegance, and kindness. So this morning we remember Ann Baird. Of course, COVID meant that for many, many months we couldn't do any kind of celebration of life in the church. But the first one that we did, and it was a small, only 25 people I think were allowed in the church at the time, was the celebration of life for Tom Chapman. Tom wasn't as active at First Parish as his wife, Carol Chapman, but many of you may have actually become acquainted with Tom's daughter-in-law, Gwyn Chapman. This, was it last fall? When did Gwyn do for Evenside and?
Yes, and also Christmas time.
And Christmas time. Gwyn offered that beautiful voice. She was the beautiful voice in the choir loft. So it was really fun to get to know her. I'd gotten to know her a little bit when we were planning Tom's celebration of life. So we had a small celebration of life for Tom, and Tom was the kind of guy, he had a large family spread all over the country, lots of friends. So one of his grandkids had kind of jury rigged, I remember, a Zoom. Actually, he kind of had a laptop and he was focusing on the 25 people. It was pretty, basic, but it worked. And there was just so much laughter during that celebration of life, because what I remember the most about Tom Chapman was his smile, his smile. Um, in his retirement, I know that which is when I got to know him, he was really an incredible volunteer for the senior center. It almost seemed like he was there every day, always available to do something, give people rides, bring people foods, bring them to appointments. Never, gave it a second thought. Anything you needed. That was his little expression. Anything you need, anything you need. And I remember I was nominated for volunteer for the year a couple of times. I think Tom was nominated like 7 times and actually won twice, which is kind of unusual. He won the Duxbury Volunteer of the Year award twice. I mean, that's how beloved he was as a volunteer. So yeah, his celebration of life was the first one we did. And I was unsure about how it would go. But, all that mattered was all the love in the room and all the love on the Zoom and that big, big smile. So we remember today Tom Chapman. Doris Prince. Many of you may not really know Doris Prince because she passed away at 97 years old and hadn't been active for the last few years here at the church. Her hearing had gotten worse and she found it difficult to come to the sewing circle, which she really loved. But I remember meeting Doris at the Alliance Thursday Sewing Circle, and for maybe a decade, she came every week. And all I remember about Doris was she was an imp. She was a character. She was very, very bright. She was very creative. And when she passed away, I remember reading in her obituary that she actually had been educated in art and was an art teacher in Marshfield for many, many years. But there was this really impish creative spirit about Doris. And I'm going to tell you a story about Doris. It's the story I remember. Liz Povinen, some of you will remember Liz, came to the sewing circle for several years with her friend Bill. Bill at that point had a stroke, I believe it was, and needed some attention, so she really couldn't leave him at home. So she brought Bill to the sewing circle. The sewing circle was basically all women, but there was Bill. So the ladies of the Alliance would be doing their sewing and their creating. And let's see how I can put this delicately on a Sunday morning. Doris was the biggest flirt when it came to Bill. She knew that it would drive Liz absolutely nuts, and not in a mean way. Liz thought it was hysterical. So all through the meeting, week after week after week, Doris would be flirting with Bill. And by the end of the hour, we were just all in hysterics because it was really so silly and everybody knew exactly what she was doing. Doris had the best one-liners, the best quips. She was a perfect lady in many, many respects, but she had this other amazing impish side to her. She just always gave it a smile and a little wink. And that's what I remember about Doris. I know in the last couple of years of her life, she lived on the same floor as Polly Landman at the Village. And so I'm sure Polly misses her very, very much. So I think of Polly when I think of Doris as well. Doris Prince. So some of the folks whose names are recorded in our book are not active members or friends of First Parish. And that's because I consider it part of my public ministry to do rites of passage for people who don't have a church connection. And it's usually people find me through some, it's not like they look me up in the phone book or that sort of, do we have phone books any longer? But you know what I mean. I don't think that's how they find me. There's usually some kind of a connection. So Robert Schiffer's family, Robert Schiffer had a niece who I knew through politics. She was an aide to Congressman Delahunt, and we had done the service for her dad here several years ago, and Congressman Delahunt attended and all that. And I kind of kept in touch with her. And when her uncle Robert passed away, the family asked if we would do the service here. And by this point, we could have a little bit larger crowd. This was last September. So we had the service for Robert Schiffer here in the sanctuary, and then we did an interment in Hanover, which was where his residence had been for 50 or 60 years. So, it's kind of interesting to do a service for someone who you really don't know. I often invite the family just to, I spend several hours with the family, and my questions are, tell me about your loved one. I really want to kind of get a sense of the person that we're whose life we're going to celebrate. And what I remember, my memory of Robert, for the most part, is that he was he was a simple man. He led a simple life. He worked as a meat packer most of his life, but he had 3 daughters, I believe it was, and lots of grandkids and 1 great-grandchild, I think. But incredible love, incredible love. Everyone who spoke about him at the service just, he was older. He was in his 80s when he passed away. It was not unexpected, but everybody just, he's just a simple, loving man. And that's the way we all should, that if we all had that on our tombstone, that would be okay. And the other thing I remember about Bob Schiffer's service was, so they asked me to drive up to Hanover to the cemetery, and they made a request, and they said, but we'd like to do a procession, and we'd like for the procession to go up through all the spots in Hanover where my dad used to hang out for decades. So we went past the diner, we went past couple of his favorite restaurants, we went past a few of the homes that he had lived in. And I found that incredibly moving. And then we finally made our way to the cemetery. So I never got to know Bob Schiffer, but I felt I knew a lot about him by the end of that day. And it was a very special procession that I was, as we made our way to the cemetery on that afternoon. So we remember Robert Schiffer. And another person who is not affiliated with our church was Maggie Davey. Maggie was, I did her graveside service, which was actually a celebration of life. There were about 50 people there, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. And this has happened to me several times over the last 6 or 7 years. I'm the co-chair of the Duxbury FACS. It's Duxbury Families, Adults and Communities Tackling Substance. I'm very active in the substance misuse community here, helping people find recovery if at all possible. And I had actually put together Maggie's mom 2 years ago. She asked me about a group that might be helpful, a support group for mothers who had Maggie went to BU. She was a really good student, but she happened to get involved with a student from MIT who was heavily into drugs, and Maggie went that route for a while. During COVID, when the schools shut down and went remote, Maggie came home and actually stopped using drugs. But later, last fall sometime, her boyfriend had moved to Florida, where his family had set him up in an apartment, so he was doing his remote learning, and Maggie decided to go down and stay with him for a few months. And on Christmas morning, her boyfriend found her dead from a drug overdose. So it was an incredibly sad story. And those are really difficult for me. This is a 21-year-old girl. All the folks who spoke at the service were, fresh young women, her best friends, and just couldn't believe that their friend was gone. And we're meeting the finality of death for the first time, and realizing how unforgiving some of the drugs are today, especially fentanyl. Maggie had just only used at a Christmas party or something, and apparently used too much fentanyl, or the fentanyl was too strong. So That's always a painful experience. I look around at the young people whose lives are going to go on, and I've done this. I can't tell you how many times over the last 10 years, but and I know that those girls will continue to come visit their mom her Maggie's mom 2 or 3 times a year, but their lives are going to go on. They're going to graduate from college next year. They're going to begin their adult life, and Maggie won't get to do that. So those are painful. I must admit, there are always tears that come down my cheek when I have to do a burial like that for a young person who has lost a life to substance uh, abuse disorder, because I do believe it's a disease, not a failing. So I'll think about Maggie Davies a lot. And of course, last but not least, Jackie Smith Miller. And when I was thinking, Jackie actually passed away a year ago, June 30th. We're coming up on the anniversary of Jackie's passing. And for me, it was incredibly sudden. Jackie and I had been walking partners for years. We even did some walking once quarantine was over. We walked during the pandemic. We had walked on a Friday. On Saturday, I was busy, so I couldn't walk. And apparently when Jackie was over at Queena's, and she visited Queena every day, Jackie had a some kind of an event. The ambulance was called, and Jackie, no one knew about this. I have a feeling Jackie never called anyone, because at that point, you really couldn't come into emergency rooms. So she knew that what would the point be to worry folks until things got settled. But around 8:30 Saturday night, something happened, and the next thing I knew, I was getting a call from her daughter-in-law saying that they had been notified that Jackie had a brain bleed. They were transporting her to Boston, and it did not look promising. And that's exactly the way things went. There was nothing they could do. They actually kept Jackie on life support for a day or so, so the family could gather. And once they took life support off, Jackie lasted almost another day. But her 3 children were allowed to visit her, but no other visitors. So for me, she left incredibly abruptly. But so I'm still kind of dealing with her death, the suddenness of it, as we all deal with any kind of sudden death. But the important thing for me is to think about her life and the gifts she gave to all of us. I mean, Jackie was for 25 years, I believe it was, the director of religious education here at First Parish Church. There were generations of young people who were schooled and loved by Jackie Smith Miller. And then after she retired from that because her husband, Reverend Bob Miller, had become so ill he needed care. And yet once Bob passed away, which was soon after her retirement, Jackie dove back into the congregation and was incredibly active in all aspects. Certainly kept the Alliance flame burning, active in the memoirs group, active in social justice and GBLTQ plus rights, active in denominational affairs, active in the women's ritual group, all of those things. She and I did several over the years, did several adult programs, facilitated several adult programs together. But for me, so those are the contributions that she made to the church. For me, she was more than that. You know, a minister, one of the things that's curious about, when I train young ministers, I always say one of the things about this calling of ministry is that it's something you have to get used to. You actually are not friends with any of your parishioners. That's not possible. The pastoral relationship does not allow for that. And actually it's against our ethical guidelines to be friends, you know, some kind of close social friends with any of your parishioners. So it's can be a lonely life at times, because the people that you really want to hang out with, you really can't hang out with all that much. But that doesn't apply to staff. And Jackie was staff. And so she and I, we hung out. we were friends. And I just, over the course of so many years, of the entire course of my ministry, 17 years, I can't tell you on how many occasions I would turn to Jackie for her wise woman, uh, for her wisdom. She was such a wise woman, as we all know. So that's kind of the part I miss the most, is being able to say, Jackie, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? I mean, in my head, I sometimes say, okay, what would Jackie do about this? But it's not the same. So I do want you to know that the second Sunday that we start the circle dinners, we're going to dedicate that to stories about Jackie. And there'll be other celebrations, other opportunities to share stories about Jackie's life. But today we honor Jackie Smith Miller. Thank you. So I think now we're going to go into our annual meeting, and we asked Jim Hamilton to come forward.
Well, so welcome to the meeting. I do think we want to get Jean Penvan, our moderator, unmuted and online, because really her first order of business is identifying whether we have a quorum or not. I know we have a couple of counters working on this. So Elaine Stefanski and Susan Taylor. If it does appear to me that by the fact that we have 57 windows and only need a quorum of somewhere around 43, 44, that we should be fairly clear. So let me see. So Elaine, do you want to unmute yourself? Susan, you want to unmute yourself? And Jean, are you unmuted?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So Elaine, what do you have to report in terms of a head count?
I have 66.
Okay. Susan, I imagine you have some number pretty much in that range.
I have a 66 with one wife or a cushion.
Okay, I think we've well exceeded our quorum, Jean. So I think I will just take it then to the call of order, and then I'll turn the meeting back to you. How's that sound?
That's perfect.
All right. So as president of the governing board, it's my honor to bring this meeting to order. I hope that we can have a very effective and interesting meeting here today. We're going to try to move as quickly as possible. And so with that in mind, I will keep this brief, and I will ask Catherine to come forward to provide the invocation.
All righty. So will you be with me in the spirit of prayer? From the power of our memory and history, with high hopes for the days that lie ahead, we gather to craft the destiny we share with each other. We gather with faith in the practice of democracy. We gather with hearts and minds open to the wisdom in every voice among us. In our gathering, may we dream and design a bold future. May we bring our best selves to this meeting. May we dream these dreams and do this work in love. May it be so. Amen.
Thank you, Catherine. Amen, it is. Thanks to Lenore and to all of you. We have a full packet. So you have the reports that we're going to be looking at. You have the minutes from our last meeting. You have a nominating report. So our job, now that we have a quorum, is to begin considering each of these pieces. And the first item in your warrant is the reading of the minutes of the previous meeting. Since those minutes are on page 7, do I have a motion to actually read them, or shall we dispense with the reading of the minutes and move ahead?
Jean, it's Jim. I'm probably not the right one to make a motion or second, but in the interest of a Zoom meeting, I've asked 3 people to be motions and seconders because of this odd format we're in. And Dustin, those folks are John Lehman, Nancy Langren, and Lynn Marples. And so if you see those people unmuting for the purpose of seconding something like this, that would be the case. So please proceed, Jean.
Okay.
I
So
move we waive the reading of the previous year's minutes.
Second.
Thank you. Item 2, report of the governing board president, Jim Hamilton. It's on page 9.
I think you need a vote, Jean.
Oh, sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It passes.
I think, Jean, because doing a voice vote on Zoom is an interesting one. So I would just recommend that when we have votes, that people put their hand in front of their face. And as I assume that this was very likely a unanimous vote, I don't think we necessarily need to repeat that. But
All right. So from here
that's what Catherine has said, that that's the best way that we know for sure. So again, I think we're good with that.
And I think we have people who can see the entire gallery. So clearly we don't have to count 60 some people every time we have a vote. So we'll just.
Well, if we see hands like that, we should be good. Yep.
Okay, great. All right. So actually now, Jim, we are at the report of the governing board president. Jim Hamilton is on page 9 of your packet. Jim.
Okay, and I will do what I would recommend other people do. I don't want to go through my full report, but if there's a highlight you want to bring out and make sure that the congregation knows about, please feel free to do that. You'll see that the report that I submitted builds around goals, a big one of which was communication, and I'm hoping that people have seen my monthly reports about the previous governing board meeting in the bell ringer. That's one of the big things that we tried to do to make sure that we were communicating and as transparent as possible. And the other thing that we did was to schedule 3 meetings with committee chairs, the last of which happened just a couple of weeks ago. And the work of the committees really is amazing. And I would like to compliment Cindy Ladd-Fiorini on the write-up that she put in the most recent bell ringer, which did a very quick summary of just some of the amazing things that are happening in the church. So thank you, Cindy, for that, and thank you, for the work of all the committees. The governing board this year has been great. I'd like to thank all of those folks, the work of the various committees, and one that I'd like to specifically lift up this year as a difficult year is the work of the stewardship committee, because I think they went above and beyond the call of duty to exceed the pledge amounts that we've had in previous years. That wasn't an easy task, and I'd like to thank them for that, and also to thank everyone who pledged this year to make that possible. So Jean, I will end on that note. So I'm done.
Thank you, Jim. Item 3 is report of the governing board vice president, Cindy Ladd-Fiorini. And I did not see that report in the packet. Cindy, do you want to report verbally?
I don't see that report either. And I think maybe that was my fault. But I have other reports throughout. The thing I just want to highlight, I think, is 2 things I want to highlight. One is the establishment of the Racial Justice Working Group through the governing board that we worked on this year, and I think has done great work. It'll come up again later, but that's one thing. The other thing I really want to highlight is the governing board itself, and during this really, really challenging year, and what great leadership Jim has given us throughout the year, and all of the liaisons and all of the people on the board. We've worked hard, and congratulations, Jim, for fine leadership.
Thank you, Cindy. So the next section is reports of the parish professional staff. And the first is by our minister, Reverend Dr. Catherine Cullen. It's on page 12. Catherine, do you want to elaborate on your?
Only say a few words. I hope you have a chance to read my report. I really tried to include a lot of detail about this year. The bottom line is I'm so proud of you all. My little mantra was, we can do this hard thing, and we have done this hard thing. We've made our way through this pandemic, and we are thriving. We are vital. We kept ourselves together. We kept connected. Frankly, if you had asked me if we could have done this as well as we did at the beginning of this pandemic, I wouldn't have necessarily, been sure, but we have done it. And we are so poised to have a magnificent year going forward in September. So just very blessed to serve you all. This is the end of my 17th year. Lucky 17, really. And it was a wonderful year on so many levels in spite of the challenges. So thank you for helping in this shared this ministry that we all share.
Thank you, Catherine. The next is the Director of Community Life and Learning, Dr. Kate Sullivan. Her report is on page 19. Kate, would you like to speak to your report?
I don't really have anything to add. I mean, except to say that, you know, we, like the church as a whole, I think, along with the RE team, we kept families engaged. We offered lots of different ways for folks to participate. And we are looking to just pick up in the fall where we left off when COVID started, which was with a lot of energy and excitement and, you know, appreciation for all the folks that show up. So that's really all I have to add.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you. The last is Music Director Edwin Swanborn. Edwin, do you? I don't see a report. Do you want to speak to your marvelous contributions? Okay, I don't see Edwin and I don't hear Edwin. So we will move to the fifth item, which is the report of the treasurer. And it's my understanding that the treasurer, the trustees, the audit, and finance actually submit for the fall meeting, but does someone want to speak to the report of the treasurer at this point, or should we move on to elected committees?
I think we can move on to the next section and we'll talk in the fall.
Okay, thank you, Carl. So under reports of elected committees, the first is buildings and grounds, and that is on page 20. Their report is on page 27. And Susan or Doug, would either of you like to speak to that report? Susan or Doug? No?
Sorry. As we speak, unless it has become too hot, the grounds in front of the church are being made spiffy for our June 20th service.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you. Okay, and so the next is Religious Education Committee. The report is on page 29 to 31. And Emily or Alexa, would someone like to speak to that?
Sure, I'm here. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
So I think we summarized everything pretty well in the report. We appreciate, you know, all the support from the congregation this year and next year as well in advance. And, you know, we're happy that we were able to keep everybody engaged. Like Kate said, we plan to pick up exactly where we left off and then some in September. Families are very eager to get back into the building and very eager for that community. So we really look forward to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next then is the membership committee. It's on page 28. Joy, do you want to speak to that? Okay, I don't see Joy. Does anyone see Joy? Okay. Then we'll go to reports of appointed committees, and the first is building use on page 33. You have the report. John, would you like to speak to that?
Well, I'll just say that one thing from building use that we're very pleased with is that this year, when we haven't had a lot of use in the assembly hall, we've had the opportunity to get it air conditioned, and we think that this will be a benefit to the congregation when we get back in the church. We'll have a more comfortable assembly hall, and we also feel that will help us in renting out the facility to revenue producing organizations. So that's if there were any questions about building use, I'm happy to entertain them, but otherwise, thank you.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you, John. Communications Committee, no, excuse me, the Caring Connection, page 34, Kathy Bray.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Just want to say thank you to all the people that made meals or helped out our fellow First Parish people in some way, because we're definitely a community, and it's so wonderful when we help somebody in need. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Communications Committee, I don't see a report. Okay. The Flower Committee, page 37. Gail, want to speak to questions? Okay. The Historical Committee, there's a report on page 37. Yeah, it starts on page 37. Carol, do you want to speak to that?
This is Sally. I'm speaking for Carol this morning.
Thank you.
The most important things, the two ministers' books have been restored and returned to us. That's been a major accomplishment. But the Historical Committee has been very, very active and is working with the Racial Justice Task Force. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Hospitality and Fellowship did not submit a report this year, so we'll move to Systems and Technology. And Ted, in your flip-flops, do you want to talk to us about that? The report is on page 39.
Hi all, from the church office while updating the church laptop, which was the cause of one of the snafus this morning. We managed to help support Dustin and Catherine, keeping the services going over the course of the year, and working with worship and music and Dustin and Catherine to figure out how we're going to combine this with our in-person services this coming year. Look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Partner Church, the report is on page 40. Jerry Lark, do you want to speak to that? Didn't see Jerry, okay. Reports by task forces and working groups. There is no report from the Bylaws Committee, but the capital projects.
Jean,
Sorry.
you've got to go to the other column. There's personnel and a few other of
Oh,
those.
c'est ça.
Oui,
Oh,
bien sûr.
sorry. Yeah, it's the eyes. Personnel on page 41. Does anyone want to speak to personnel?
Hi, that would be me. No, we didn't really have a lot of activity in the personnel committee this year. So
Social justice is pages 41 to 44. Cindy, would you like to speak to that? Who is going to speak to that? Are there any questions for the?
That wouldn't be me. That would be
social justice.
Be Eleanor
or Mark.
If Eleanor's not here, I can speak to it. I think it's all there on the page, and hopefully, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it was a good year, I think, especially considering the type of year it was, and it's all there on the screen.
Yeah, and I will add, it's Eleanor, that we think that the group was wonderful because we were able to start a new program when Father Bill's went out of COVID business, I should say, because of COVID. So a new program, a luncheon program in Plymouth, as well as, I just want to make sure everyone knows about how the box project regrouped from taking the stuff directly to the people's homes. So we're real proud of the whole group.
Thanks to both of you. Yeah. Okay, then the next is stewardship. The report is on page 44. Mary, Amy, Nancy, Tracy, anyone want to speak to that?
Nancy would like to.
Okay, Nancy, thank you.
Am I on?
Yes, you are. I can hear you.
Okay. I just want to thank everybody. The numbers are wrong. We actually this year brought in $183,777 in pledges, which is an amazing feat that we've never done. And it's just thank you to everybody who did it. People were just very generous. Not a whole lot of prompting and no asks, and people just really stepped up. And I'd like to thank everybody who pledged. I also want to highlight Amy Hamilton has been on the committee forever, not forever, but she's been on for a long time, and she rides between treasury and stewardship, and she's just invaluable. And she's leaving this year, and we will greatly miss her. She promises to stay on and still do the liaison work. She just doesn't want to bake the cookies and things like that. So, but she said she's still, and we couldn't have done it without Amy. So thank you so much, Amy. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Nancy. Okay, so the welcoming congregation committee report is on page 45. Mary or Jennifer, does anyone want to speak to that?
The report speaks for itself. I will say that we got very good feedback about a service conducted by CB Beal. And so we were super pleased with that. And I just want to call people's attention to the brand new rainbow flag. It's not from Welcoming Congregation Committee. It should be, but we ran out of money. It's a gift from Cindy and Mike Wilson. So many thanks. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to the Worship-Music Committee, and the report is on page 45. Who would like to speak to that? Michael? Michael Gardner? No? Okay. So then we move to reports by task forces and working groups, and then again, no bylaws. But then Capital Projects Planning Committee, page 35. John Lehman, do you want to speak to that?
Well, I just want to hold up that we've been engaged in making a number of improvements to the church sanctuary and the parish house that will aid in handicapped access, easier availability to our congregants and others. And you'll see this work continuing. And in the fall, we will be back to you with plans, ideas for completely redoing the front steps of the sanctuary to make that a more easily accessible way of getting into the church. And we hope that that this will be an improvement that will last for a long, long time. So that's our work at present.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Cell program grants and committee. Carl, are you going to speak to this on page 55?
Sure. Yeah. So I have a report in there that kind of lays out. We had quite a few different grants that we worked on this year. We do have a couple others that that I need to work with the committee to review and go through here in the next week here. So, but I also want to particularly thank Donna Savicki, who has been on the committee for the last 3 years and is rolling off, and did a tremendous amount relative to organizing particularly the social justice grants and so forth on it. So thank you, Donna.
Thank you, Carl. Any questions? Seeing none. The growth team, the report is on page 60. Sharon Nabreski, do you want to speak to that? Or anyone else want to speak to the growth team? Okay, I can't see someone. So the next is envisioning the sanctuary, and the report is on page 59. Again, there are lots of members to this task force. Does anyone in particular want to speak?
Yeah. Hi, Jean, it's Jim. I'd be happy to. I mean, the report is there. I think the main thing that people in the congregation need to know is we've been working on this for a while. We paused during the pandemic and then picked up working with the consultant we chosen, Scott Taylor, who has been a tremendous resource for us. You may also know of him because he is behind the, oh God, somebody's gonna have to help me on this, the name of the themes and content.
All matters.
Thank
Soul
you so
matters.
much. I knew you were going to help me on that one, Kate. Thank you. So we've been very happy to have him. We're working through a process sort of discovery, creating questions, and in the fall, you'll see a very, you'll start to see the fruits of our labor. And in fact, Scott Taylor will be visiting us either sometime in October or November. So this process is moving forward. The idea ultimately is that we figure out what we want the sanctuary to be for the future, broad questions of what the purpose and the meaning of the sanctuary is to us, and ultimately to come to some sort of conclusion and have a vote in the spring. So that's envisioning at this point. It's been a lot of behind the scenes work, but you'll see it come out specifically in the fall.
Thank you, Jim. Dan, any questions? I don't see any questions. We're moving forward quickly on this because obviously we kind of got off slowly. So pandemic fundraising, I don't see a report, but obviously we did pandemic.
Yeah, so it's Jim again. I'll just throw out that in the past year, the pandemic fundraising group essentially did 2 virtual auction fundraisers, which I'm sure many of you will remember. We hope to maybe have something else happen before the end of the year. We did not want to conflict with the stewardship campaign, and then of course it was just not possible this year for us to have the regular summer fair. But do keep in mind that we have blocked out the last Saturday in September for some kind of event on the lawn of the church. It won't exactly be a church fair, but we're looking to have it be something where there will be items for sale, there will be food, there will be music, and a nice opportunity for folks to gather on the lawn in the good weather of September. So that is our plan for that. And I'd like to thank the other members of that group. So it has been me, Sharon Nabreski, Jay Bray, Pat Slechta, and Tracy Wagner, all working to try and see what we could do. And we're always open to ideas from folks about what we can do to fundraise in these unusual times.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, small group ministry steering committee annual report. It's on page 63. Cindy, do you want to speak to that, or it speaks for itself?
I think it speaks for itself, Jean.
Thank you. And then the next is racial justice, which is on page 61. And Cindy, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, just briefly. This group really came together quickly in June as a acknowledgement that we had done a lot of work. The Racial Justice Task Force had done a lot of work and had come up with a resolution. And then because these things happen and other things became, foremost in our mind, not too much happened after that. And we just felt that it was really important to get it going again, and did. And with Jim leading a series of discussions, whole congregation discussions, we voted on the Black Lives Matter banner in a positive way. And so the working group's first order of business was really to get that dedication out in September. And we've done a lot of other stuff as well. And hopefully you've seen it during the year in the Bell Ringer and in the Thursday News, and the book discussions and whatnot. One of the things that we're trying to do, and we're going to make a bigger push probably coming in September, is to integrate racial justice working group work within all of our committees. And so that we can, everybody is looking at our work through a racial justice lens. And so that's something to look forward to. It's happening already in the historical and worship and music and RE and whatever, but so that's something that we're really working at. That's it.
Thank you, Cindy. I don't see listed on the warrant the safe congregations, but they did submit a report, and it's on page 62. And I don't know if Sharon or anyone else wants to speak to that.
Yeah, I can speak to it. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I've been having trouble with my unmute button. These Miss Ghost Team. We've been meeting all year, every other week. We've done a lot of work trying to keep up with all the changes in the COVID regulations. Sure most people are aware of that. A lot of requests for the uses of our building space, which we had to deal with. And right now we're gearing up for our outside service in 2 weeks for Flower Sunday. I hope everyone will venture out and join us. That's it.
Thank you, Sharon. Okay, so report of affiliated organizations, the Alliance on page 49, submitted by co-chair Nancy Ovaska. Nancy, do you want to speak to that? Okay.
The report stands, and just thank everybody who was involved in the parlor committee, and looking forward to when all the furniture arrives and we can have some sort of a reception or tea or something befitting a parlor for the Alliance. And thank everybody who was involved in this. A lot of work.
Great.
That's all.
Thank you, Nancy. Everybody's done a lot of work this year. It's amazing. Pastoral Care Group, page 50. Michael, would you like to speak to that? Michael Gardner?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sure.
I just contacted him. He's in the car. He's on his way. So if anybody else in the group would like to speak, I would just say that the group has been amazing, and reach out during this particular pandemic year has been really important to so many people. And I've gotten letters, everybody has gotten letters and response from people of how much they appreciated being reached out to. And it was an amazing year, and very, it was good for the people that we reached out to, but it was good for people on pastoral care because it was incredibly meaningful to reach out to people at this time when they really needed it. And everybody on the committee worked really hard to do that. So I think it was one of the best, seeing as it was pandemic, we just continued and deepened our efforts. And I have no idea what Michael wrote for the annual report, but that's the essence. So.
It's fine. Okay. Thanks so much, Sherry, and safe drive to Michael getting home. And the last under affiliated organizations is the Senior Men's Group, and Fred Stevens has signed that. It's on page 51. Fred, do you have anything to add? Let's assume not. Okay, so now we move to the report of the nominating committee, and at this point we have to also tend to the election of officers and committees. And Tracy, would you like to speak to this? Who is going to speak to nominating?
I think Mary's going to do it.
Mary, okay, instead of Tracy Wagner, okay. Can you unmute yourself, Mary?
Yes. I'm a little bit, I know Tracy couldn't be here. She has an urgent and unexpected family matter. So I'm afraid I do not know where people can see the nominating report.
Okay, there was a link to it on the post for this meeting. So it was embedded in the email was both the annual program meeting packet and the score from nominating. Do you want me to actually read this? Would that be helpful? Do people in general have this?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I would be happy to read it out loud, and that might be our best way to go. Anybody have an objection to that? So the nominees are for president for the second year per our bylaws is going to be Jim Hamilton, and vice president Cindy Ladd Fiorini. Treasurer, the nominee is Carl Schweitzer. Clerk, the nominee is Regina Mortland. And the board members are Lester Lloyd, whose term is still ongoing, Sally DeLisa, whose term is still ongoing, Pat Slechta, whose term is still ongoing, and 2 new members nominated are Mark Schlesinger and Jay Bray. The moderator is Jean Penben. Her period is still ongoing. The nominees for the nominating committee are Jean Baker, Nancy Langren, David Murphy. Peter Baker's name is in here incorrectly. He will not be a nominee per his request. Tracy Wagner and Mary Flanagan. Trustees, the ongoing members are Lynn Marples, Rudy Langner, Rob Robison, and Tom Connor. And the new nominee is Tonya Hamilton. Finance Committee. The ongoing members listed here are Nancy Langren, Heidi Connor, PJ Simeone, and Jane O'Farrell. And it's my understanding that there is still a vacancy on finance. Anyone who's interested in this is a very important part of the church workings. Please contact any member on the nominating committee. You could contact Tracy, you could contact me. We would love to hear from anyone. Buildings and Grounds, ongoing members, Susan Taylor, Larry Norse, Troy Riley, Kim Wyman, Doug Friesen, and Phil Angel. And a newly nominated person who has served previously is Linda Pelham. Religious Education, there are no new nominees. The current members ongoing will be Heidi Connor, Nettie McQuarrie, Donna Clifford, Emily Simeone, Carolyn DiCristofano, Lily Leadham, Alexa Howell. Worship and Music, the ongoing committee members are Michael Gardner, Carol Robison, Pam Blades, Elaine Stefanski, Liz Chrisman, Gary Stanton, Shirley Jenkins, and Susan Taylor. Cell Program Grants, ongoing members are Marianne Kaufman, Sally DeLisa, Tracy Wagner, Gail Murphy, and Carl Schweitzer. And the new nominee there is Mark Schlesinger. Appointed committees, there are no new nominees. Building use, there are no new nominees. Capital Project, no new nominees. Caring Connection, no new nominees. These people have all agreed to serve again. Thank you all. Communications, no new nominees. Fellowship, ongoing will be Sharon Nebreski and Julie Lillies, and Lynn Marples, Heidi Connor, and Troy Riley are new nominees. Flowers, no new nominees this year. Everyone is continuing to serve and we thank them. Historical Committee, the same. The current members are serving again and we appreciate that. Membership Committee, ongoing members are Jean Baker, Kathy Bray, Tracy Wagner, Pam Blades, and Joy Sawyer. And there's an open position. Again, membership is going to be exciting this coming year and it's a really important position. If you'd like to work with these awesome people, give somebody on nominating a call or give Joy Sawyer a call. She's on that committee. Office Systems, no new nominees. Partner Church, no new nominees. Personnel, no new nominees. Social Justice, no new nominees. Stewardship, ongoing members will be Nancy Ovaska, Tracy Wagner, Mary Flanagan, and Pat Slechta is a new nominee. Looking forward to that. Welcoming Congregation Committee, this actual report is not exactly accurate. Jerry Lark and Cindy Wilson are taking a break from the committee. Ongoing members will be Mary Flanagan, Liz Connors, Alex Pevsner, David Murphy, and Jennifer LaPointe. So I think I could probably make a motion to accept these new nominees as read.
Yes, yes, you can move, and that needs to be seconded. Do we have a second? I see a hand for a second, so we have a second. So all in favor of accepting the entire slate of nominees, please put your hand over your face. It's approved. And so we are now looking, I invite Catherine to return to us for closing words and benediction.
Well, I think it's amazing. I sat here and listened to all the reports, and you would never have thought that this was a challenging year with all the activity that's gone forward in the church. I'm amazed by you all, just simply amazed and grateful. So I have these closing words. I do want to put in a plug for the next 2 services. Believe it or not, the church year has only 2 services left. Next Sunday, we are having a storyteller. Should be fabulous. It's sponsored by our diverse music team. And as Sharon referred to on the Sunday, June 20th, our Flower Communion Sunday, it is an event on our front lawn. We are going to be in person. We will be Zooming. Dustin will be there. So those of you who really feel uncomfortable coming into an open space, you'll be able to see it on Zoom. We've got the Flaming Chalices playing. We've got the Bell Choir playing. We're going to have Peter play a few songs and say goodbye to him. He helped carry us through the pandemic. Ed will be playing from the organ. We'll hear the organ music wafting onto the front lawn. I just can't wait. It's going to be spectacular. So we hope to see you on Sunday, June 20th on the front lawn. And there will be some kind of coffee hour, some kind of coffee. We haven't quite figured out the details to make sure it's all safe, but there will be coffee. So look forward to ending our church year in that really celebratory way. So these are my words today for you all. Go in peace, speak truth, give thanks each day, respect the earth and all creatures, for they are alive just like you. Live simply, be of service, be guided by your faith and not by your fear. Go lightly on your way and enjoy this beautiful day. Amen. So thank you again for showing up. You're amazing people, and hope to see you. We've got 2 services left before we end our church year and start our fisherman services. So hope to see you next Sunday, and then out on the front lawn on Flower Communion Sunday in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Catherine. So I have tried to move this along really, really fast, and I haven't cheered all of you on as I've done it. But I also want to say, in asking for a motion to adjourn, how rich this has been. Those were wonderful reports, looking around, so many people doing such fabulous stuff. So thanks everybody for hanging in despite the problems that we had getting launched. And thanks so much to everybody for all that you do for every one of us. So I need someone to move that we adjourn this meeting.
I move we adjourn.
Do I see a second? I see a second. Okay. It's moved and seconded. Shall we vote? We are adjourned. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.